by saying congratulations on the film. I've had the chance to sit down and watched it, and I absolutely loved it, so congratulations.
Thanks, man. That's great to hear. Appreciate that.
I also wanted to ask, do you know how much buzz there is around this film at the moment? I've been working at the Melbourne International Film Festival for the last couple of weeks, and the amount of people that have come up to me and asked me, have I seen Six Festivals, has been absolutely amazing. Just about everybody that gets up to give a speech puts it into their top films to watch at the festival. Were you aware of that, and how does that make you feel?
Yeah, actually, to be honest, I had no idea. I know, I just got back from Melbourne. I was down there for a couple of our screenings in the opening night, but yeah, I sort of kept to myself, just given all the COVID stuff, and I wasn't feeling great. But Sydney Film Festival, we definitely felt that vibe, and there's a lot of people talking about it and great turnouts. But had no idea about Myth, and man, I'm just honoured. It's such a nice feeling. We put so much energy and heart and soul into this film for so long that just hearing that stuff just makes me so happy.
So, mate, tell us a little bit about where the journey with this film first started for you. Where did the idea first come about?
It's something I've been toying with for a very long time. I wanted to make the move from documentary over to narrative and scripted drama. So, obviously getting told a lot, write what you know, and just wanted to make sure that the first feature I did was going to be unique. I think that's really where it all started from, and just wanted to tap into my experiences as a touring artist first and foremost, as a music fan, and just, I love coming of age stories. I've always wanted to play in that space and want to continue to do so. I felt like I had a pretty unique upbringing as far as my childhood with my friends, and a lot of stories, a lot of colourful characters. So, over maybe 5-6 years ago, I started to sort of map out a bit of a concept on how I could bring all those worlds together. And I thought music festivals was an interesting backdrop to set a story of friendship and tell them through the prisms of just the festivals only. This pressure cooker of a pending illness and these friends having to come together to, talk about it, deal with it, again in the backdrop of this euphoric kind of live environment. I thought it just lent itself to something that wasn't, your standard kind of narrative. So yeah, it was a couple of years ago, and it sort of took a while to develop, and I didn't really back myself as a writer at the start until I sort of started picking up some momentum, and then just realised that a lot of these anecdotes, stories, dialogue was all coming from my experiences, and then just grabbed the bull by the horns in the last 10 drafts of the script, and it was exciting to just see the reactions to it. People love the script, but obviously it just gave me a funny look because they knew how challenging it was to turn that script into a reality, and I knew we had a challenge ahead of ourselves, but I was in so deep, and I was very excited by the concept that I wanted to see it through.
I think one of the things I loved about this film was that the three teenagers are going through very real problems. Quite often when we watch a film, we see characters that are going through things that we could never dream about going through in our lives. But for many young people out there, and for many of us, we've been through the problems that you explore in this film. Tell us a little bit about how that realism was important to you to capture with the film.
Yeah, look, the word authenticity was the key word. I almost every day in the writing process, and on set I'd have a big piece of paper and just write authenticity and stick it up somewhere where everyone could see it. The reason being is I am obsessed with true stories. I feel like, all those films that hit with the hard-hitting kind of themes that everyday humans go through just stick with me the longest, and I wanted to make a film like that. And, there's some real issues that teenagers are going through, and I feel like it's not really talked about. And then on the other side of it is music films, I feel, can tend to fall short and be a little cheesy. I think they're often written and made by people who aren't necessarily embedded in that culture fully, or they're, potentially got the opportunity to tell the story much later and reminiscing back on the day as opposed to still having their finger on the pulse, from a demographic and cultural aspect. And so I feel like I was in a unique position to tell this story the way it was told authentically, and, obviously get all the artists on board, get their tick of approval from an authenticity point of view, and everything from music choice to performances to the words that were coming out of the kids' mouths had to be legit and feel like you were there with them, and it was stuff that would happen in real life. So yeah, just it was from top to bottom, and in the edit it was our final kind of pass of that authenticity test. So everything had to be legit and real.
Did you base the teenagers on people that you knew when you were growing up, or people that you know now?
Absolutely, yeah. They're all each characters based on some of my best friends, and sometimes an amalgamation of 2 or 3 people into one. And a lot of Marley's story and her experiences were some of mine coming up as an artist, and I was challenged early on to look at flipping that role into a female role, and I thought it'd be even more interesting to have. It's hard enough trying to crack it in that industry, let alone be a female and of colour. And so I wanted to inspire a younger generation, particularly an Indigenous and a diverse cultured audience, to look at that and see someone stand up and be brave and kick down doors and amongst all the mishap and mayhem, that you could still rise up.
Can you tell us a little bit about the casting as well? Because you've got the perfect casting with your lead 3. They are absolutely amazing in this film. Tell us a little bit about that casting process and how you knew that these 3 were the perfect 3 for you.
I tend to have pretty chronic OCD with everything I do, and casting was a whole other level of OCD, so it took me a long time to get the cast right, but I did find Rasmus King first. He was 13. I knew him through the surfing circles and was just following him and all the content he was putting out on his Instagram page. I wanted Maxie and Kane to be real brothers, and I wanted them to be able to surf for the surf scenes I had in mind, as opposed to getting stunt doubles, which just, again, back to that authenticity test. So I love the idea of Rasmus and Kai as being real brothers in real life and being able to come together and play these roles of brothers in the film. So I casted those 2 and then really built the cast around them, and took a very long time to find the other 2. Our casting agent, Maura Fay, and Lee Pickford, our casting director, just did a great job in finding me people who were authentically young and diverse, and Yasmin Honeychurch came as the next one, and I casted her because of the audition tape she did. Was just like, she had a brilliant voice. She nailed the the scene, but it was at the very end, before she turned the camera off, that she gave us this little quirky kind of sense of insecurity at the end that really just was Summer. And so that was Summer sold for me. And then James, who's played by Rory Potter, I went through hundreds of tapes to find the James. James had to be a very warm, likeable guy, given everything he was going through. You almost didn't want that character to be someone who complained and you kind of got sick of on screen, so he needed to be super likeable. And at the 11th hour, Rory had sent a tape through our casting agent, who was he was on tour in Europe on a theatre show, and that's why the tape came in so late. But within the first minute of him speaking, I knew we found our James, just because he had this nice warm tone to him, very likeable face, and in real life he's just the nicest human, and just everyone loves him. And he was such a music fan; he was obsessed with gin rats in real life, and it all just made sense. And then Guyala Bales, who's played Marley, I tried so many different avenues for the Marley role. I initially wanted to cast a real musician for that role. I was talking to a few high-profile artists, and unfortunately they fell through for different reasons. I guess fear of commitment to expose themselves in an acting role for the first time. And so I started looking at actors, and then I came across Lala on I think it was an ABC special on maybe an Australian story piece, and she just popped on screen and was very eloquent, spoke well. And when I looked into it, she was a poet and was great with words, and you could tell she was very much embedded in that urban world. So I knew she could pull off the role of an up-and-coming rapper, and she was by far one of the quickest learners out of all of them. And first time acting, but just came forward in leaps and bounds, and made the experience incredible. So yeah, extremely proud of our cast, and we got to spend a lot of time together before we got on set. And a lot of the stoppages through natural disasters of bushfires and floods, and then the pandemics, just meant that they spent way more time together. And my theory has always been that some of the relationships that I've made over the years have been made solidified quicker through, like a big night out or a trip away. And so I sort of implemented that concept with the young cast where we had, a week and a bit away in an old shack in Byron. And we wouldn't really look at the script. It was more about getting to know each other. We'd play games, we'd go surfing, we'd barbecue, play soccer, and that just brought them together. And then all the stoppages, they spent more time. So by the time we got on set, there was a real magic of friendship that had already been created, and so that really kind of showed on screen.
Yeah, I was going to ask this question later, but you just touched on it now, so I'll ask it now. How did the pandemic affect the filming? Because, of course, we didn't have music festivals or even shows for you to go along and shoot during that time. How did that affect the production of the film?
Yeah, it was a nightmare. It was one of the hardest, challengingest projects I've ever had to take on. It was, first of all, we went to shoot our first festival late 2019, and it was cancelled by the bushfires. Then soon after, we found a replacement, and that was then flooded and cancelled. And then the pandemic hit, and there was 2 major lockdowns. We were able to find festivals in between lockdowns that were still operating on a mainly in Queensland at the time, and the approach was to shoot the festivals first to get them while they're actually running before every festival died, and then go back and put all the pieces of the puzzle together with set builds and everything else that needed to be shot. New South Wales at the time was also making it very difficult for festivals to run. There was a lot of drug ODs that were happening a couple of years ago, and they made it extremely difficult with festivals by making them cover additional police presence, and there was a pill testing scenario that all these things were, a lot of the festivals that were floating about the following year, they were no longer a closed up shop, or they had a couple of years off just because it was very, very, difficult. So the pandemic, made it super tricky just from a time perspective, but also our cast was aging, particularly Rasmus, who was young. Our little babyface assassin was growing rapidly. Luckily, he remained that beautiful angelic baby face, and his voice didn't drop too much. I guess the silver lining was, with all the time that went by and that slowed us down, it meant more people were able to hear about the project, particularly, at the time we were trying to find a streaming partner. Paramount Plus came on the scene and were looking to launch in Australia, and they were looking for young, exciting content, and I had pitched it to Paramount Plus, and very early on they loved it, jumped on board, and it just meant that we solidified our financing because of that slowing down of the pandemic. So there was a silver lining, but I was dying a slow death, through it all, but we got there in the end.
Yeah, and like I said, it's an amazing result, so congratulations. And the other thing that really spoke to me with this movie, I grew up the son of a roadie, so music festivals and shows were a rite of passage for me growing up. How important was that to you to capture that world in a realistic way? Because, of course, we don't get very many coming-of-age story films here in Australia. We see a lot coming from America. How important was that to you to capture that realism of the music world, but also to have a uniquely Australian voice with this film as well?
Yeah, well, when we first set out to do this, I never, I thought about the idea of making it an all-Australian soundtrack, but then obviously with the lockdowns and no international bands travelling, we were getting a lot of pressure to say, put in some big name international artists in there for the sake of, selling this thing overseas. And I figured, this could be an opportunity to just really hone in on making this a celebration of Australian music. And I took a hard line on that, and we do have a couple of Kiwi acts, but everyone else is purely Australian. And so then it was really about getting in there and using my documentary, I guess, flavour and background to shoot it in a more guerrilla, raw kind of tone at these festivals to make it feel like you're really there. We had a bit of a rule where, we had a freedom rule and a containment rule, and we applied freedom to any time that the kids were at festivals. They were away from authorities, no parents, no teachers, and that was all handheld 50mm lens where it was closer to the human eye and it felt like you were there with them and were running and gunning. So it gave it that looseness and that realness. And then if they were with the police or at home or in a car, with authorities, a more structured environment, then we were more, sometimes a little wider but locked off, more of a composed type frame. And the dynamics of those two kind of meant that we could marry it together and give us the light and shade that, you know, represents that roller coaster emotional journey that teenagers go through. So I think, you know, getting in there, real festivals was a non-negotiable for me, real bands. It made it difficult, but gave you the realness that you see on the screen.
Definitely. Well, mate, to finish off, what would you like to say to people out there who are thinking about going along to see the film in the cinema or on Paramount Plus?
Yeah, look, I just really want to urge people to, I guess, to go back and give people a bit of insight. Pitching this film was one of the most difficult things I'd ever did because young Australians don't watch local films, and the funding agencies kept making that clear to me. And my pitch was that that's because we haven't made a young film that resonates with young people for a long time, so let's give this a chance. So I guess people took a risk and a chance on me to make this film, and now I'm hoping that the Australian audience, you know, follow through and give this the opportunity, because I do feel it's a real authentic story that will resonate with the young audience. It just needs the chance, and I feel like it's the film that deserves to be watched on the big screen. It's surprisingly an emotional journey, not just the colour of music, but will definitely resonate. And Paramount Plus is great that August 25th it comes out on there, because it means it has a home for people to eventually find it. So yeah, grab your friends, grab a couple of drinks, dress up like you're going to a festival, and go enjoy this thing and reminisce with your friends like the old times.